So we have one hard copy that's up there that needs to stay by the door, and then I have versions I can share. Yeah.
Need to call us to order.
Right, Chair calls the meeting of the Resiliency Advisory Board to order. Roll call. Vice Chair Eric Lardy,
Present.
Board Member Knappett,
Here.
Board Member Morgan,
Here.
Board Member Williams.
Here.
Board Member Egon is out due to emergency situation. Board Member Garrett. Here. Board Member Meyer. All right, we have a land acknowledgement. The Resiliency Advisory Board acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of the Kumeyaak, the Isano, the Penyo, and the Kika. Today, the Kumeyaak people continue to maintain their political sovereignty and cultural traditions and vital members of the San Diego community. We are honored to share this space with them, and we thank them for their stewardship. So the next item is approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
Anybody needs I can share my screen. They were also attached in the meeting. Materials.
Is it appropriate to ask questions?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a requirement to show the exact votes of each member for each motion?
I believe so, but I can confirm that.
I believe it is a Brown Act requirement.
And then, my other question was, is it not necessary to show the exact wording of each motion? You know, this is practice from another board that I was on that did both of those things. And we didn't show the actual count, just the totals of the votes, and we did show the actual motion language. So these are just information.
Well, no, yes, talk about Robert's rule, that's good to know. Yes, this is a situation with the Brown Act.
For the motions, again, I can confirm. I think if it's something as simple as like approving, it's not. So if it's just like approving yes or no, but if it's
So, and again, I'm not trying to change what has been, if this has been your standard practice for all commissions, then fine, that's the answer. Just like I thought, you know, I'm saying the motion is to do blah, 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 or so-and-so moves X, that language is sometimes.
it should be as stated for that.
Anyone have any questions or comments about the motion?
I just had a comment on, when it shows the roll call, of who is here in the roll call. It might be helpful to also just footnote where the people came in after the roll call, so Erica was here, participated, but it looks like she wasn't here.
We do have that in the notes. May actually move us over to the big screen so you guys can see it.
Or say arrived at.
I don't have the time that you arrived, but I do have that you joined the meetings.
Yes, no, I saw that I was there.
So that will be similar for today for Andrew, of just he wasn't here for the roll call, but we'll note that he has joined.
Since we don't have a time, was it recorded the last meeting?
Yes, parts. We missed the very beginning of the recording. It didn't capture.
Do we have a timestamp for when Erica arrived?
We can add that.
Okay, did you want to make a motion?
I would move to show the timestamps of late arrivals in the attendance report. Or in the roll call, I guess.
So the question from the board is to, from now on, make the timestamp when members arrive, if they arrive after the roll call. If possible, to do it for Erica, if that's reported.
Yes, so yes, for the we can add it in. It wouldn't actually change the roll call section, but it would add, we can add the timestamp for when she joined the meeting.
In favor? No, in favor. Unanimously. Any other motions regarding?
Do we have a motion and a second for that?
that,
I made the motion, was there a second?
yes,
The other way person.
Yeah,
and that was to make the change, so we still have yet to approve this with that.
I'll move approval of the minutes with one change, Julia, under item 5, the first sentence, there's a typo with vice chair.
Nice try, thank you.
Yeah.
So the motion is to approve the minutes with the addition of the timestamp and the wording
Yes,
correction for item 5.
Was the timestamp a second motion?
That was a separate motion, so we need to approve this particular one.
A second approval of the minutes with that change.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So the minutes are approved with those changes. Item 5, non-agenda public comment. Do we have anyone here from the public?
Yes.
And anyone online?
We have no one online.
Would you like to make a comment? In that case, we move to item 6, where we have comments, for from board members, mayor's office, and staff. Would any of the board members like to make a comment? Do anyone from the mayor's office or city staff in general would like to make any comments or updates? Do you have any updates?
Yeah, so I have one update, that the Mission Bay, 10-year improvement plan, PEIR, went out. They released their NOP at the beginning of October, and so that is out. They had their scoping meeting earlier this week. It is open for, public comment until November 1st. All of that information is online. So just a kind of general awareness of that. They have their overarching timeline as well. It is not anticipated to be moving forward through public hearings until next fall. This is just the very beginning stage of completing that environmental report. But did want to put that on all of your radar. That includes a series of projects in the Mission Bay area, including many that have both a resilience and a conservation component. There's a seawall proposal for a portion of Mission Beach. There's some habitat restoration at different locations within the bay. So I would encourage you to take a look at that if you determine that you want to comment. Just know that that is available and in progress.
do they have a time frame when the draft DIR will be ready for public review?
They do, I do not know that off the top of my head.
My question would be if tribal consultation has been done at this point.
They will be doing tribal consultations in accordance with SEPA. I don't know the specific. And they have the information on the website for the project managers. If you had any particular questions about the project, they would be the best person to reach out to on that.
Anyone have any questions? Thank you so much for the update. I'm excited to see that going forward. Item 7, return to discussion agenda, of course, the draft bylaws. Sarah, would you the subcommittee like to present on that?
Sure, so just pulling it out. So first I want to
Get that
thank.
on.
First, I want to thank Jamie and Erica. We had a couple of meetings and in between working on these and putting these together. Just to kind of orient to what we did and what we're proposing right now is we took several of the other bylaws that Julia had provided and prepared draft bylaws. I think everything in here is draft and subject to comment for the committee. But the way that we formatted it is certain areas where we thought there'd be more comment and more decisions to be made added in a box so that we can have a discussion related to that. So I don't know, open to ideas is the best way to really go through this. If we want to just kind of go high level section by section and see what people's comments are. I think it would be appropriate to take any comments, make any small edits here, and then any other comments we can make, finalize, and then bring the final draft bylaws to a subsequent meeting would be my recommendation.
might be the most efficient way to do it section by section.
Section by section makes sense. Do you want to lead us through there?
Sure. So, section one, intent and purpose, sorry, article one, section one, purpose and intent. Really just outlining the San Diego Municipal Code and the establishment of the committee and some of the language from the resolution that authorized the committee. And amended the code, right? Some of the plans that were called out specifically. I don't think this list is meant to be all inclusive, but just some of the main plans the city has.
On this section.
Any questions or comments?
Is the climate advisory committee replacing the old energy and sustainability?
So the climate advisory board replaces the sustainability and energy advisory board, and then the resiliency advisory board replaces the wetlands advisory board. So there are certain functions of the previous wetlands advisory board that would now come to all of you, along with the scope that's outlined in the resolution. So a bit of what I'll present on later, but all of our resilience and conservation.
Seeing no comments on this section, we can move on to Article 2, which is membership and operation. I think the first two sections, section 1 and section 2, are essentially verbatim from the resolution, the appointment of 11 members and what entities make the recommendations on those appointments, and then the terms from them. I think section 3 is where we're making some more recommendations related to attendance and what were to occur if there was attendance that was not being made on the committee. And so section 3A is generally a statement about attendance, and then B would be trying to provide some guidelines of what would be an excused or not excused absence, so that if there was someone who was not attending for 3 consecutive absences, there would be a notification to the city council to see if they want to retain that inactive member or replace them. Ideally, hopefully we would not have to really exercise this section. I know we don't have a full board right now, but this was in the climate advisory board bylaws, and I had thought it'd be appropriate to retain, and I think the committee helped me. Sorry, the subcommittee helped me draft some of the language related to this.
So I have a question about this section. And by the way, thanks for all you guys putting together the draft. That's a lot of work. I'm impressed. The thing that wasn't clear to me on this one, it says the board may find or shall find a member is inactive upon. So to me, that means there's some kind of board action. And it wasn't clear whether that action would be by a simple majority of those present, or a majority of the members, or a super majority. I mean, I couldn't tell what that, because that was, if you get to that stage, the process is going to be a little bit tense anyway. So I thought if it was clear what kind of vote, then it wouldn't be an issue later on.
Is that automatic? Because it says as determined by the chair.
I kind of taken that as a definition. That these facts now are true, are demonstrable, and personal inactive.
But I think what I was trying to say is that the chair makes a determination on the facts of having missed 3 meetings or something, but there's some action that's taken to actually say the member is no longer active. And I think that's what I was getting to, is that otherwise you wouldn't need this, the board shall, I mean, it'd just be the chair finds, right?
Well, I guess the question and decision point would be, do we want it to be automatic and basically power delegated to the chair? Or would we want it to be something agendized and voted upon by the committee? I don't think I have a strong preference either way. Either way, I don't think this committee has authority this board has authority to remove someone, it would be city council. So all we'd be doing is notifying.
Reporting something, yeah, okay.
You have suggestions for alternate wording?
Just a question about Eric, your last comment that we don't have the authority to remove anyone and go to city council. I would read section D here as suggesting that staff liaison notifies the office of board and commissions. Are you, does that imply going up to the city council as well, or? I guess I wasn't sure and didn't read this to mean that city council got involved in the decision of this sort.
Let's continue working on C. I think there's still a question of the wording. Anyone have any thoughts on alternative wording for that?
How about the board shall report the member is inactive upon?
So is that a motion to strike, find, and insert report?
Sure, yeah. So moved.
Second, no discussion.
Feedback.
So it would be the board shall report a member is inactive on. Report.
Oh, so you're just adding the word report.
Then
Versus
read that
find.
fine, yeah.
Got it. Did you still have a question as determined by the chair?
No, that's fine, yeah.
Okay,
So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Right. Erica, you had a question on D.
Sorry, who made the motion for that?
That was Sam.
Sam.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Name tags next one.
Yeah. And the second,
Ian. I got that one.
I was just not clear about the role of city council. It says the staff liaison can request a nomination candidate for city council confirmation. Doesn't say anything about. Do we infer from that the city council will be informed and need to take action to strike an inactive member?
Yes, I was operating this under the assumption that that would be then in their role to decide what to do in the appropriate path.
I would agree. This is hopefully a situation that rarely occurs. This would be if you're having many unexcused absences, there are, the ability for a board member to not attend if there's emergency or just cause. Or if, multiple board members are unable to make a meeting and we decide to join the meeting in advance and that advance notice has been given to the chair. Those are all situations where it doesn't ping against a board member. So this is really if you had someone that just stopped showing up and participating in the role, which given that this is a role that all of you have applied for and volunteered your time for is not something that typically happens. But in this case, particularly for positions that were nominated by a council office, they would then have the opportunity to nominate someone else for that position. I'm not sure the, particulars of the communication between the Office of Boards and Commission to their council member and what that looks like, but they would be engaged in the process.
There is a language issue that I have a question on. The request of whom? And my understanding is that the mayor appoints and then the city council confirms.
What line are you looking at?
The staff liaison can request the nomination of a candidate for city council confirmation. So is whom the nomination is being requested.
Of the city council. Or the city council.
Now you got me confused. So the.
I would-
Yeah.
Yeah, it's this one, the staff liaison. For city council confirmation.
I mean, to make it a more complete sentence, I guess we could say, can request nomination of candidate for city council confirmation by the appropriate nominating person. Some are nominated by the mayor and some
Yeah.
are by city council.
So is that a motion to insert by the appropriate nominating person?
Just the nomination of a candidate.
That's one word.
Appropriate. Nominating.
Nominate.
Yeah, maybe nominator. I was struggling with.
Nominator.
I
We'll come back to
thought
this.
in my, just attendance at one meeting, that in this case, the mayor appointed all positions, having conferred with council. But I don't think there's any other authority.
An appointment separate from nominating. So sometimes a city council person can nominate someone and the mayor decides.
That's true.
Feel free to correct
And
me.
then
if I have
no,
that
that's
incorrect.
correct, and then they go forward to council for nominations. I actually think the way you had it written before was fine.
Yeah.
And we don't need to outline the process necessarily here, it's just that, we can also remove this. Because that's not really a board bylaw, that will be one of my suggestions for the later section is, these bylaws should really be outlining all of your role, and so like the bylaws will not outline my role, that's something that's within the city's kind of oversight. And so since this is really outlining what would be an action on my behalf, we could remove this entire section. Because this is going to be what is the board's action and oversight. Once it gets beyond that, it's coming to my role or the Office of Boards and Commissions role, which does not need to be included in your bylaws. So that would be my recommendation.
I can make that as a motion and move that, maybe just a slight alternate is then say under C, the board shall report to the staff liaison, a member is inactive. And then remove all of D.
The question is, insert, so the board shall report to the staff liaison, et cetera, and strike D.
Yes, that would be my motion.
Second that.
Debate?
Makes sense.
That gives us who to report to, which is a good idea.
All in favor? Opposed? Are you ready to go on to section 4?
So.
Thank you, Eric, for going through it section by section.
No, this is great. This will help us finalize them. So section 4, some of this is fairly straightforward with the chair and the vice chair as they were outlined in the handout we received at the last meeting. The resolution highlights a secretary position. I know this is also on the agenda, but one of the things that we had discussed is, okay, well, what should the role of the secretary be? That wasn't outlined. So this was really our recommendation of what would the role of the secretary be, tracking the motions, drafting and circulating the meeting minutes, and then really tracking the attendance under the attendance policy. This is the first section where we have kind of a few different options. One is to define and establish the goals for that as we have or as alternate. One is to remove the secretary position, or we could add any other positions or make any other changes as the board feels appropriate.
I have a suggestion, so that you have more flexibility in the role. There's the option to add a bullet here that would say, and other tasks as like decided on by the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary and staff liaison. I think that gives you a little bit, there's still some like oversight of the chair, the vice chair would need to agree. Secretary would need to agree, but then you can kind of expand or shrink tasks as needed.
And other tasks as determined by the chair.
That item E was actually supposed to be a bullet as well, I think, Eric. Sort of say that.
Yeah,
Any suggestions or if anyone wants to make a motion?
Well, I would just, when I spoke in the subcommittee, about the wisdom I thought of establishing a secretary position, but it's also based on, experience with similar boards where there has not been, an attentive staff liaison. And the board was left to its own devices. And I have to say, I've been very impressed with the amount of support we've been getting. So I would ask Julia whether that is a sustainable role for you.
I would welcome more support. If the board chooses to elect a secretary and someone is open to taking that position.
So I was gonna take it in the other direction, so this position may not be needed.
I think that's a good point. I think, if we can free up any staff time from kind of menial efforts like just recording, that's great. So I don't know what you're recommending.
So then adding on to that, Julia, do those 4 bullets make sense for things that you would no longer be leading?
Yes and no. The first bullet, tracking and recording all motions and votes taken by the board, that would be a great task for the secretary to take on. Drafting in advance, the meeting minutes is helpful. I will still be in charge of circulating all of the meeting materials. So meeting agenda and all meeting materials are posted 72 hours in advance, at least before the meeting, to our website. And as we post those, we also send out a notice through the constant contact email list so that anyone who has signed up for board updates knows the agendas of the meeting materials are up. I will maintain that role, so the circulating piece could come out.
Drafting and submitting in advance.
Drafting and submitting to the.
But the posting, all of that is retained.
Yeah.
I think that's really good.
And advance next meeting at least 96. Is that one more day beyond 72 hours?
96 is just one.
Okay, thank you. 96 hours. in advance.
Not to overcomplicate it, but would you rather put one business day in advance?
Yeah.
Of 72 hours? Cause like that would have
Yeah.
been Sunday this week.
I do like that.
Good call.
And are there times, Julie, in which you would like it 2 days in advance, if or something like that, if you're not in the office that day?
No, because if I'm not in the office, I'll make sure someone posts it.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's a special request, I'll coordinate. I'm gonna be out for an extended period of time. It's- Right. It's not popular, that needs to be, but. Drafting and submitting to the staff liaison at least one business day in advance of the 72-hour posting prior to the next meeting.
The next minute, the next minute.
Prior to, thank you. The next meeting.
Advance of the 72-hour
Posting deadline.
deadline, yes.
Meeting. Minutes. Posting.
That all can come
And
out,
then we
right?
can just remove this. I'm gonna say draft meeting minutes then. I guess they're draft, but they're.
So can I ask a question
Of
about
course.
this process? Are these meetings recorded?
Yes, so the last meeting, we had a little bit of like a technical glitch, so it did not record the entire meeting. This meeting, hopefully, it should have been recording from when I start the Zoom. And so then we'll be posting the recordings onto the website as well. That is also really helpful when doing the meeting minutes.
So I was
You
thinking,
can
yeah, if you
watch
have
the
a
recording
recording,
and it has, if you missed a motion or a second, it can pull from it. So yes,
That's
it's very
it.
helpful for that.
Any other questions? Does anyone want to make that rather than the motion?
I'd be glad to make that really complicated.
Or as written?
I'll second.
Oh, could you please state the motion?
We'll have to state it.
I don't know, it might be adequate to just say
As
as written on the screen.
Yeah.
It's written on the screen, of course.
Well, it's also, we are, taking option one.
Yes.
Thank you. So the motion
That was the most.
select option one, as written on the screen
As
there,
it- as it, yeah.
and we seconded,
Yes. Andrew did.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Right, motion passes. We're on to.
To section 5, subcommittees. So, this talks about formation of subcommittees, 2 types of subcommittees. One would be if we wanted to select standing subcommittees. One of the big nuances with that would be that they would be subject to Brown Act requirements because they would be standing and advising us, advise the city council. And so this is some information on what would be the content in a motion to create a subcommittee, and the content and preparation of a charter, giving direction on purpose, objectives, memberships, and meeting schedule. Then it also highlights ad hoc subcommittees or task forces similar to the group that created the draft minute, or sorry, the draft bylaw. And that could be more limited in nature as long as it's less than a majority of the quorum. This talks about that standing committees would need to create meeting records and meeting minutes. But one of the things we talked about was we don't think we need to outline any specific committees at this time in the bylaws. It's just outline what would be the process if down the road we decide to create subcommittees. And then that would be number 4, just saying that they should be reaffirmed annually or as necessary by the chair to keep the membership and content fresh for the subcommittees. So welcome any comments, questions, or edits on this section.
There is, oh, so there's Andrew. There is one small item on 3 all standing subcommittees. Maybe all standing committees.
Yes. That is changed. And then Andrew, did you have a comment?
I have a question about quorum. I don't think that it would need to change throughout the document, but for quorum, will we define it as relative to the 11 people that are or 11 positions, or the people that are appointed and sitting in the committee at the time that these actions take place?
It's relative to the total position, so for you guys, it's 6 to be.
So if there are only 7 people on the committee, you still need 6 people to do all these things.
So,
And-
yeah, there, it's in Article 4.
Yeah.
We're hoping to get all of the seats filled, which would be nice, that provides you guys a little bit more flexibility for quorum, but currently it's still set pretty fast.
Are they looking for new members? Or?
We are,
Have them already like, or just in the process?
we are still waiting for any additional nominations. Applications are still open. I welcome you all to share that opportunity. Believe it is District 4, 8, and 9 that the seats are open for. So if you have people that you think would be good representatives of those communities and work in the resilience and conservation space, please share it with them, please share with your networks.
You said 4, 8, 9.
Hold on that line. I had a question earlier and I didn't bring it up because I don't want to slow anything down, but
Is it related to this particular subcommittee?
well, it has to do with membership and how whether or not we meet the requirements of the ordinance relative to that. So you want to do that different or? It really isn't going in this section, so I'll hold that.
Any questions or comments about section 5? I'd like to make a motion with that addition of sub.
There's another sub.
Oh.
I can't even see it.
Standing subcommittees right beneath them.
Like following.
We could do with all corrections.
Graduation. Maybe also here. I have a subcommittee charter. And you don't necessarily need to make, for these small edits, if you don't want to make a motion, you guys will adopt the bylaws, not at this meeting, because they'll still need to go to our city attorney for review, so. For small edits like this, if you're all are good with them, we don't necessarily need, motions for this. So I just-
Zero.
Yeah, I just have a question about your correction.
Yes,
Resiliency versus resilience.
yes,
And what are we actually?
you are the resiliency with a Y board.
Resiliency. That made a little correct.
It is climate resilient with a T, SD is the plan, and you are the resiliency advisory board.
Just
with a Y.
resilience.
Yeah,
So there are a number of
and I can
places.
go through it for that too.
Section 6.
So, yeah, section 6, this one, verbatim from one of the other bylaws, I believe, the climate advisory. But it seemed fairly straightforward language.
Last one. On to the next article.
Okay, so Article 3, Section 1 is the duties and functions. Most of this is language that was included in the resolution establishing the committee, including periodic reports to the Environment Committee, working with other potential advisory boards. The ones that were called out was the Community Forest Advisory Board, Planning Commission, and Climate Advisory Board. But that's not meant to be all inclusive.
Questions on this section?
Let me just express a philosophical view. I don't want to make any recommended changes. So I think with our organic document is the ordinance establishing the board, and it has a definition of these functions and things. And it's pretty broad, like 6 kind of categories of things there. What you guys have done is way beyond that, so it's really, moving us forward by saying what more things we should be looking at. But here's the question I pose, and I think we'll see later when we start talking about all the other plans and things. I think one of the hardest things for this group is going to be to prioritize activities to try and make a difference. And so that process of prioritizing to me is a board function of saying we could do this or we could do that. Both of them are called for, we can't do everything. So that decision process to me is, in my mind, something we haven't gone through yet. I don't want to change what you guys have done. There's a lot of good things. And I'm just saying those might be things that are less important than some other things that the board decides. And to me, as long as they're within the framework of the ordinance, we're okay. Even if they're not listed here, this wouldn't be to me an all-inclusive list. It would be a list of many of the things we need to work on, but not all. I don't recommend any change.
Yeah, my general recommendation for this section would be to have it your kind of, your purview is set by the resolution that adopted your board, so to have this reflect what that resolution says. And then I think Sandy, you're exactly correct, I mean, resilience spans many subject matter areas, there's a tremendous amount that you guys could focus on. And to have that come out of the work plan, which I believe is in a later part of the, it's right next in the bylaws.
section.
Of the work plan really helping to narrow, like, what is your focus going to be for this year? But have this section really just come from, what is already set in the resolution.
I do have a question about that.
Mhm.
If the municipal code regarding the Resiliency Advisory Board were amended, then this would need to be amended as well. Would it be simpler just to have a reference to the municipal code, so in case that you don't have to worry about amending two things at once in the same, having inconsistent documents?
Unless the code section changes.
Yeah, I don't think the code section would change. I would hope it would change. I like the idea of referencing that. I think it makes it easier, to not have to amend multiple. And it just keeps you consistent with the code. So I like, I would be in favor of that.
To strike all that. Just put the code section at the top.
Well, I guess my question is, are all these whereases in the resolution included in the code section?
They are not, so you have some that are beyond what's included in the resolution. I think I would recommend staying with just what's in the resolution that's adopted. I think you know, what is laid out there is pretty broad. This first one that you have is these first few are within, and you know, the advising on the topics of infrastructure planning, readiness, climate, environment, climate equity, sustainability, those are really broad kind of guiding statements for you. So I think, again, I think some of these that are maybe a little bit more specific, there's some down here, I think that advising on potential public-private partnerships that advance resilience, sustainability, and energy goals, that could fall under that larger umbrella, but I don't know that you necessarily need to call it out. So I think for consistency, again, I would say have it be consistent with what's in the code, and then think about priorities going into the work plan for kind of specific topic areas that you maybe want to focus on, depending on what's currently moving forward in the city or areas of interest for the board itself.
Do you think strike this out and just having a sentence that would reference the municipal code?
Strike out this whole section.
That's the question, as far as consistency.
That's up for you guys, or you can carry over what's in the code if you'd like to have it outlined here. Sometimes people like to carry it over, just there and you can see it.
Yeah, I mean, we already have at the very beginning a reference to the code. I mean, if that's the desire, I'd recommend we just replace it verbatim so that it's kind of a one encompassing document, so you don't have to go back and look.
Well, I guess I mean, I think that this language came pretty heavily from the climate advisory board's draft. Am I correct in that?
I'd say a lot of the additional ones that were not already in the resolution were from there. Yes.
So perhaps a way to sort of finesse this would be to have one of these, like, that isn't directly drawn from the municipal draft, serve as a, you know, other areas could include, and make some of these sub bullets. I don't feel strongly about, you know, the pilot projects one or the regional events one. But there are some other things that I think do merit being called out. For example, coordinating with other advisory boards and their projects. Including climate advisory board, is typically still out there. That's not in the municipal code, but it is, I think, an important function of this group. You know, and then the functions of primary channel communication on these issues to a whole host of audiences. And I, yeah, climate advisory, I felt pretty strongly about that, and I would share that as an important part of this one as well. But it doesn't have to be you know, a heading equal to municipal code. So. What about,
Let's strike 6. 7, maybe.
move to, change item B to include, to insert important functions may include, and then make current 3, 4, 5 as subheads
And strike the rest.
and strike at least 7 and 8. And I'm open
Thank
to
you.
discussion about the rest of these.
To see what it looks like.
You know, do we,
Okay.
this provide peer action reports to the environment committee, make recommendations. You know, I don't feel strongly about that, but maybe others do.
Where did you want the important functions may include?
I would put it in lieu of what's currently number 3. And then keep the text of number 3 in as a sub-bullet. The first in the line of several important functions may include, but not be limited to. I am.
I think
Doing
maybe
too much here.
covers it.
There we go.
Yeah, let's see, there's something about wetlands in here, and that's one thing I hope we're gonna come back to.
6.
Um, You know, what functions from the wetlands board do we retain? Those seem to be worthy of particular call out. Yeah, all right, I probably said enough on this.
I mean, that's,
Yes.
I have a question. I had the same wonder about what should carry over, what could carry over. But when it comes down to it, the city's attorney is gonna look at this and we cannot go beyond the resolution that created the board in the scope of things that we're deputizing ourselves to address, right?
Correct.
So we would have to make the case amongst ourselves and maybe to somebody else that this does fit in our purview under the resolution. But that's kind of our last, or that's our specific option if somebody says you can't come to this concept. So whether the Wetlands Advisory Board had something that is now no longer our purview, we'll have to, it has to be in the resolution, like, we have to argue that it is.
Correct. There are some functions of the Wetlands Advisory Board, such as certain deviations, that would occur on projects would need to come forward to the Wetlands Advisory Board. I would anticipate that those would transfer to you, but I can confirm that with our city attorney during their review, if that's helpful.
And I would think we need some kind of space holder bullet in there for those wetland responsibilities.
Yeah, and I was, sorry, just as specific as possible, that would be very useful to know.
And did you have a question or someone had a question? I have a tiny thing. I just would get rid of board will for number 3 because we're not starting any of the other ones with, I would just start with develop. I'm like,
You have to change it all to progressive tense, but that could be done better.
And then for this, I am just going to make a note for myself.
Does anyone feel we should retain the current draft 9 coordinating with these other advisory boards? Or is that implicit?
oh, I was gonna say that, what is 6 and 9 are directly from the ordinance itself. So
They said.
I think they would stay. And so is 10.
Motion?
I moved what's this?
Article 3.
Article 3, section 1. So, yeah, because we haven't found the message to it yet, in the, language as edited.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
So then maybe sections 2 and 3 can be taken together. But the first one, similar to what Stan was saying, developing a work plan. We had selected January as seemingly an appropriate month to prepare that and work on it. And then making an annual report to the Office of Boards and Commissions on that work plan, essentially in December of each calendar year.
About that, Eric?
Yes.
For everybody, is there any understanding that the environment committee would rather have it? You know, when they're not all doing their annual reports or something like that, is there a timing that might make it more useful for some? I don't know the answer to that, but
For the annual report.
yeah, like would they prefer our update in October so that they can include it in there, so that can inform their annual plan?
You could provide an update if you wanted to, or I can provide an update from the top of the board to the environment committee, but the annual report timing is like set to be at the end of the year.
Okay, never mind.
So
You guys say-
Everybody's over the moment, Jason.
I know, so everybody have the same.
So we're ready to move on to Article 4, which is meetings. So this is one that we had started the conversation. At the last meeting, we did a few different things. In section 1, some draft language if we wanted to have a standing time frame of essentially the third Thursday of every month at 1 p.m. At here or somewhere near here is one of the options. And then option 2 would be some sort of different rotation. The other piece we are proposing as part of that is outlining the special meetings and what would be the goal and process for having special meetings and some of the objectives that could be used to have those. So I think there's pros and cons each way. Some of them, if we had sort of a more regular meeting, I think it would keep us regularly doing some of those tasks to establish what is the work around and other things. But then if we get to phases of work that really want more outreach, getting the community, alternate meeting times, alternate locations, would probably be much better at getting that outreach. So this is the draft information. I think, yeah, taking section 1 and section 2 together probably makes the most sense though. And I guess we just said that we had talked about potentially meeting monthly with some other months, so this was a recommendation. I know a lot of entities kind of skip August and then December with everything else going on. The third Thursday is probably very close to holidays.
That's what I'm
Thursday, November. It's Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving is the 4th Thursday.
it's like this year.
We decide between option 1 and option 2.
Yeah, I think that would be the first question. That's option 1, or if anyone has alternate recommendations.
I like option.
I'll make a motion.
I would love to. Move option.
A second.
All in favor? Opposed?
Sorry. Slow. I'll oppose my own motion.
It's just a sort of a point of philosophy. I can put some of that language in there and see, and it's under that notion that special meetings need to have a clear reason. And a plan. These are some of the things that I would hope we could develop along the way to saying, yeah, we're gonna have special meetings, but here's the reason why, here are the objectives to be reached by that. Not do it too casually.
I have a question about the bylaws. The section 2 is not defining the second part of section 1's option 1, right? The meetings will be held in the vicinity of the Civic Center unless designated to be in a different location. That's not what is going to be called a special meeting specifically. Could be, but doesn't have to be, right?
One other comment, I didn't mention it first, but this also highlights that joint meetings could be an option with also committees.
On D, is there just, anyone want to, the subcommittee want to discuss the other considerations?
All right, can we move down a little bit?
But it all need to be capitalized.
Well, I could speak to the other considerations, and I just, in the spirit of if we have special meetings, get outreach, are there other things that we should be considering? And these were just some things I had thought out there, they might be kind of off the wall or maybe not even appropriate for the bylaws. So I'd be open if somebody wanted to strike it. But to get people to attend meetings, it really should be parking or other transportation options. And then what else can get people in and participating? Assuming that there's not a large city budget to fix all of these things.
No, we don't.
Do you have a question?
Thank you for nixing the acronym. I wasn't really digging it.
I have a question about D. Eric, those all seem great. Or they are great. I would add to it, translation, so that's an option. But, can we accomplish these things without being able to pay for them? Is there any?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Subject to funding?
Yeah, are these may or shalls here?
Maybe it could be turned into just a more census, like special meetings shall consider other things too.
Shall consider to the extent feasible.
Yeah.
We're gonna say should. Should.
Should.
And translation is something the city does have translation services. We do tend to have an overarching budget for it. But that would need to be something that Cynthia would coordinate with me in advance on when do you think that you would need it. To confirm that we have that budget, because depending on what initiatives and outreach we have going forward, we may or may not have that budget available.
Does the city have interpretation services such as Excel?
Yes, we can practice as well.
See, these are, to me, these are perfect example of the kind of things that the subcommittee needs to be thinking about when we commit to having study meetings. We have that all figured out. What is and is not available.
Julia, the other things are capitalized, so should it be a capital T?
Yes.
Are we treating special meetings?
Actually, I don't think any of these need to be
Right.
capitalized
They
though.
need to be.
I think you can get rid of any other considerations in the parentheses and just say should consider and then list everything. Cause you're saying considerations.
Should consider. Thank you.
Parking and childcare.
So.
Considerations.
Um,
Feasible and considerable.
I think parking, I'm wondering instead of parking, we should say,
Transportation.
Yeah.
Transportation.
accessibility, yeah, something like that.
And so these, I mean, I think for, this, you know, that could be making sure that you have a hybrid option, right? So that it's
Mhm.
accessible and people are able to attend the meeting, don't have to get childcare to attend, like that's a way to go about it. That you wouldn't necessarily need budget for this, but that you're making sure that it is more accessible.
It has been considered. in
Yes,
both.
yeah.
Yeah,
All these things are great. I'm just wondering, are we giving, use word consider, are we giving special consideration for these meetings that aren't being applied to our regular standing meetings? Is that a blind spot or am I not seeing that right?
I think we're giving some special consideration to different audiences
Yeah.
that might come to special meetings but don't typically come to this meeting.
Which would be part of the purpose of the special
Which is
meeting.
exactly, yes.
just stated an A.
Sorry.
It's an A. That was one of your things you were talking about at the beginning. That's one of the purposes, yeah.
So no discussion. I don't think.
We may not do that.
I could use that.
No, I just didn't wanna put us in a weird spot if we're doing
Yeah.
that for one meeting, but we're not doing it for others, but if it's special, it's special, I guess.
And that could maybe be something if you are having special meetings that whatever you do for one, you're kind of then maybe setting the precedence for what you're doing for other ones, so something to consider if you do both of those.
You're picking up what I'm putting down.
It seemed like if we're gonna do special meetings, we have to figure out how many we're gonna do. That's part of it. It's like, is this a series? Is it a single meeting?
That could be part of the work plan too.
That's part of the subcommittee's work.
Yeah.
I'm just finishing up this section. I'm wondering, do we still need line F? Because we've already talked about accessibility there.
No, I don't think you do.
Yeah.
Any other changes to section 2? Oh, yes.
Just to Ian's point, can we just take D and put it also in section 1? Just say that we will, all, you know, because to Julia's point, having a Zoom meeting is also a way of thinking about transportation and accessibility. Can we just commit to considering these things for all of our meetings? I think we should.
I mean, I guess the way I think about it, right or wrong, is that some of these things are things that public outreach folks would consider if they were trying to do like a bigger public outreach campaign to get people to attend. So some of these, I mean, accessibility, absolutely. Refreshments and childcare is really just ways to get different members of the public to be able to attend meetings.
I think to accessibility translation, those are standard for these meetings that people can request that in advance if they need it, the translation services. Or this hybrid, so
Okay, so those are baked in.
it's not an oversight, it's baked in, yeah.
I'm fine with the specialness of it too. Makes sense, especially if we're trying to intentionally get public involvement.
Any other questions or comments about this section, or just someone want to make a motion? Delicately weaving together all these changes.
I think again, if you guys can continue to make motion if you want to, if you're generally doing, you could just like have these be something that's adopted.
Of that? And section 3?
So section 3 is about the quorum. It was highlighting that the absolute quorum is out of the 11 members. We've got to be good to have, okay, what happens if there's 5 people sitting around for 15 minutes? What do we do? And just make it clear that the meeting has to be canceled, you really can't have a meeting under the Brown Act. But one of the things that we had thought that administrative votes such as approval of minutes can be passed with the majority of the members present. So if there's only 6 persons there, and one person wants to abstain because they weren't there, for example, that they could still pass the minutes and but that a formal recommendation to city council would need a majority of the board. I think this is all subject to the city attorney's review if they have any concerns with that. But I've seen other committees do that before just to keep some of the business moving.
So let me ask you, is on the administrative votes, you still have to meet the quorum requirement.
You still have to have a quorum to attend or
Yeah,
to even have a meeting.
right, right.
But a quorum and a majority are the same, basically, as we define them. Is that true?
The way I would read this is if you had 6 people, you couldn't really, you have a meeting. And it doesn't require 6 votes to pass administrative issues. That intent.
I guess my intent is, yeah, if you have 6 people and only 4 of them vote yes on the minutes, you could still pass the minutes. But you couldn't make a recommendation to city council without essentially everyone voting unanimously. Really, the only issue I've seen this is sometimes people abstain on the minutes and then you don't ever have minutes that are approved. So. I don't think it'll be a huge issue.
$15 minutes, nothing.
Or a vocal festival, or, no. What is it?
Virtual meetings, I feel like they're-
No, just to give folks enough time, because it says if no quorum is reached within 15 minutes, meeting is canceled. You wanna,
I feel like the maximum commitment time is 30 minutes, which seems like a long time to
Yeah.
wait to.
do 20.
I've been to Mission Bay Park Committee meetings where the chair is on the phone with somebody who's stuck in traffic and they'll be like, they'll be here, they're on their way, but they need whatever. And so they wait.
Okay.
Not that I wanna wait for sure, but just FYI, it might come up that, or it might be that you know somebody will be here, but they will be.
Yeah,
Do you want a specific time or do you want to leave it and then the meeting is canceled unless such and such decides otherwise?
Well, let me ask you this, Cynthia. To run meetings, say if we only have, yeah, say if we have 5 people. And the chair or the vice chair is present, could we leave it up to their discretion? We say that at the discretion of the chair or vice chair. That way, if there is someone like about to be there, but they show up at 18 minutes, or if they showed up at 21 minutes. Are we mandated by our bylaws to still cancel a meeting after that person rushed to get there?
What about without notice, like if someone called and said, I'll be there in 5 minutes versus we can't get a hold
Like,
of
no,
this
like
person?
you're-
Yeah,
yeah.
like how do we say that?
I think if you say at the discretion of the chair at the end of this, and then if Cynthia's not chair, it's Eric acting as
Right.
chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys need to then notify Cynthia, ideally, if you're not able to attend, you're notifying us well in advance, but if you're stuck in traffic, then you notify Cynthia and say, I'm on my way, but I'm gonna be 22 minutes late, so like, can you hold? And then
Yeah.
that would be at Cynthia's discretion of whether or not the meeting is canceled or whether or not we wait however long.
Can we run a meeting without Cynthia and Eric?
So that's actually the next section.
Yeah.
Right, do we want, sorry, going back real quick, Julia, do we wanna put chair or vice chair or just leave it at chair? Like, in case,
It would be the presiding officer, generally the chair, not that vice chair.
Would be acting as chair.
we'll be acting as chair, okay,
Yeah.
so it's inclusive, alright.
Okay, before we move on, can I ask a question then about quorum?
I
I make a motion to ask a question. So I read this part B at first, Eric, to say that you can do administrative votes without a quorum, but that's not what it's saying. Because a meeting would not have started officially in order to take a vote. You could have 5 people here and a majority of members present could pass the minutes, but it wouldn't be a meeting in order to do that. Is that true?
That is true. It would still need to be 6 members present. Or higher, and then just a majority of those 6. So if you get 7, it could be 5 and 2.
Then I like the idea that B is in there, to help meetings run. Given that there might not be enough people on the board, or there might not be that many people on the board, or some people can't make it. Do we know what administrative votes entail? Is it only the approval of minutes? I appreciate that you specified that recommendations to the city council do not count, but are there other things that? I guess my question is, or my reason for asking it is that for the Wetlands Advisory Board, who I've talked to a lot of people who were on that board. They felt, people who were still on it, felt that there wasn't support from the city to add new people to the board. And people who were appointed to that board they didn't have enough to actually get quorum for years. Because there wasn't support from the city for one reason or another, or there's nobody that would come from one of the districts that they couldn't find somebody. So it really hobbled their value. And without saying whether, or I don't know whether it was intentional or not, but it really hobbles the power or the value of a board if there's not enough people there. Is there anything besides the caveat part B that you have here about administrative votes that can help the board move along if there are fewer than 6 people here?
I think you have to meet more to have a meeting. That would be a kind of question for our city attorney to confirm, but you have to have quorum to make the meeting.
Yeah. If you defined it differently, you could end up with 2 people here and making all kinds of great decisions. But so could you find out, Julia, if there is any other measures that other boards have taken to empower them in any other way? I don't know, but I'd be curious.
For example, just redefining the basic size such that quorum is based on the number of positions filled, not the number of positions approved.
That seems like it would be, that's what I'm talking about.
Anything like
Seems
that.
like it would.
I mean, I've
Yeah.
seen, that's what happened to the sustainability boards.
Yeah.
Where positions just were not being.
I do want to flag, we did have a non-agenda public comment that we missed. And we have, I'm gonna stop screen sharing here for a minute. Because we do have some hands raised as well, so we may want to take public comment at the end of this. We now have people participating.
Let's keep going with this is making some good progress.
Yeah.
Sure.
Anything else on section 3?
I was just gonna say, I could not think of anything that was just a clear administrative vote, but I didn't think that something might not come up in the future, so that's why I added it that way. Then I thought that, okay, there should be a bar that you have to have a majority, so that's why I added that second sentence.
Is, for example, something like changing the sequence of items on the agenda, is that administrative in nature? What can a group of 5 people sitting around, what can we do?
Yeah.
But we can't actually declare a meeting, so maybe
That's
it's moved.
Yeah, no, I
Can't
think
really
this
do
fine,
anything.
sitting around can't do anything. Unless we hear otherwise. So I think that one we'll hear back probably from city attorney, probably have a follow-up conversation. Section 4 goes to some of the questions. So this is just a blanket. If the chair is absent, the vice chair would have those powers during the meeting. And then should there be no vice chair or chair, those members present would need to select somebody to chair the meeting. And then section 5, I think is just the same as the ordinance, so it's probably not necessary, but it just references the municipal code, the city charter, the Brown Act, and Robert's Rules of Order.
Add a period.
And then section 6, kind of goes with section 7, but it's really the board meeting agenda, how items would be added to the agenda. And then, so the option 1 is the language as written below, which is, any agenda items can be suggested, but the final meeting agenda is set by the chair, and communicated to city staff. And then that C is that board members would propose additional agenda items at the appropriate time. And there's under section 7, number 8 is a line item to propose future agenda items. Sort of an alternate or slightly different approach would be this option 2, which could have, I don't know, Eric, if you want to summarize option 2, you might be better at it than me.
So option 2 was intended to do 2 things. One is to provide a clear deadline so that in the current draft A, it says agenda items may be suggested by the public, doesn't say by when. So in terms of getting something into the chair in enough time for it to be considered on the agenda, that was part of what I was trying to do. Then the second thing was to, again, help provide information to the chair about the nature of the item. Is it just general information? Is it something that's going to lead to action or introduce topic for a later time or future discussions? And then provide an opportunity for clarity. So there may be more process there than is needed. I felt like the opportunity for a more open input mechanism for agenda items would be useful. So it's really maybe over to you to think about how you want to get this idea, because I kind of wanted to make some suggestions and I didn't feel that the opportunity was there.
It certainly would be helpful to have it within a certain period of time, because I do send the agenda to Julia about a week prior. So to have it a week plus a business day or 2.
Yeah, I would, a few thoughts. I think this, if you go with this text, I think that is fine and kind of broad, like agenda items can be suggested at any point in time. That doesn't mean that they're going to be put on the next agenda, but just at any point in time, public, city staff are welcome to suggest like, hey, we'd like to come and present this to you as an information item. That was always an option. I think in terms of setting the agenda, that should be something that Cynthia and I are coordinating on and confirming the agenda together at least a week in advance. So in advance of Cynthia and I meeting, she would need to have any suggestions that are coming to her. And then I may also be getting suggestions. So city staff that are working on items may say, hey, what we're doing has a resiliency component. I really like to share this with the Resiliency Advisory Board. And then I communicate that back to Cynthia and say, so-and-so is interested in sharing their work with you. So I like maybe carrying some of this detail down if you guys want to keep this language down here. I think that that's helpful. I don't know that you need all of the detail, but I think kind of some of it would help refine it.
I think just to add on this, because it may have been appropriate to bring this up under the duties of the secretary too, but one of the things that I find is often arises and is a downside to a group like this is that there's no follow-up on items. And that something that is discussed and moved almost to the point of action in a particular meeting doesn't make it all the way and isn't carried forward in an agenda that follows. So I think somewhere, somehow, there needs to be a mechanism to include closed loops. That we carry incomplete items, resolutions, somebody's presented something, what's the action item out of this, back to the agenda in some way.
That's a pretty Robert's rules.
Information items that come forward don't require an action. Anything that would be a discussion item should have an action.
Should have an action, yeah,
Yeah.
should come out of the discussion of what the action is going to be and when it's going to get carried forward onto the agenda. So just making sure that that actually happens. To me, that was the point of making sure that people can say, you know, remember we said we were going to do X.
Under section 7, some agendas will have a line for unfinished business or otherwise worded. or old business, excuse me.
So that's, we're coming back to that, okay, fine.
Are the noticing requirements different between action and information items?
Yes. We still need to have all materials posted 72 hours in advance.
72 hours. Okay, so even for info, it's still 72 hours.
I think you have more leeway with info, but we like to post everything, just so it's
Because I think
it's posted.
I'm just thinking if someone comes forward and says they want an info item. After within the week.
Yeah,
So it's option one with the details and red line below.
yes, this would be option one, and then option two is the language that's in here. And there's also the option if the board has suggestions on details, the subcommittee could go in and refine the language, or we can do it presently.
So that's an action item that could come out of the discussion, you can create a subcommittee to do that, refine the proposal.
The bylaw subcommittee could refine this text if you choose to. Or we can carry forward what is taken here, depending on how the members feel.
I feel like with the action items that you're talking about, I completely agree, that's so important. But I think that's just up to all of us as members to follow through on things and, you know,
And I think it's probably covered by C there.
yeah.
Yeah, it means that you will continue to roll things forward. Yeah, we'll discuss that again when we talk about the order of business.
I think we're ready for order of business, so this is a proposed order of business. I think generally we're following that today. There's a few kind of action items that we want to discuss. The non-agenda public comment, where that should be on the agenda. The committees do it different ways. Some have it at the beginning, some have it at the end, or some have it at the beginning. But have a time limit set so that it's not delaying significantly the start of the meeting. And then that I think goes along with section 8, which is how to accept comments if there's late comments submitted. And then if there is agenda items with significant public comment. These are just some draft guidelines I came up with. If we have 20 speakers on one item, that'd be an hour testimony, reduce it to 2 minutes. I don't know if we'll get that level, but thought it's good just to give the chair guidance in the bylaws themselves.
Any thoughts? Did you want to add an item between 6 and 7 on old business?
I think that's one possible change. I think the other thing I was gonna speak to was, items 4, announcements and board meeting member comments, along with non-agenda public comment. Unless agenda is constrained, like it is an option. Both of those tend to be indefinite periods of time. Very open-ended. So when an agenda is full, you have sort of an idea of how long something's gonna take. Board member comments could just blow the whole agenda, or so could public comment. So for those reasons, I would favor moving those indefinite length items later in the meeting, after regular items. So that would be a second sequence change.
I agree with having them at the end, but can we make a note to leave 15 minutes, leave at least 15 minutes for those so that we don't run out of time? Guarantee we get to those.
Answer the question if there is an item that ends up requiring 3 hours of discussion. So it could be to the board's discretion, just to not bring up any comments about what this, I just want to go home.
Yeah.
Cable.
I think that makes sense. I also think that the announcements and comments are not supposed to be discussion items. So they should
should be
be
brief.
briefer. But I think having will help encourage that.
You know, and it could also be the 3-minute limit advice to ourselves.
Yeah, I struggle pushing non-agenda public comment to the end, only because it's always at the beginning of all of our meetings, it feels a little off to me to have that at the end versus to continue at the beginning. I think maybe putting a time limit on board member comments and noting they should be brief informational type updates. They're not discussion items, but I would lean towards maintaining the order that you originally had. Like, that would just be my recommendation of, I think it gives space for the public to comment on something in advance of the meeting. That's typically how all of our meetings go.
Do you normally put that time limit or no?
Not for board member comments.
What about the public? No?
No. I mean, there's a time limit for them to speak, but we wouldn't say like, this will only be 15 minutes. If you want to agenda public comment, there would just be a time limit on the length of that comment.
Often the chair has discretion to reduce the time per person, or some people will group together and give a 2-minute presentation.
Speakers, limitations.
There's a limit that the city puts on Zoom comments. It's like you have to be in the queue.
You
5
have to
minutes
be
after
in the
Zoom.
queue, yeah.
So that's a
Yeah.
mild curtailment to it.
Hmm.
But I also think that the non-agenda public comment should stay at the beginning.
Second.
What about the
vote on it? Unless there's anything.
It sounds like we're just moving it back to where it was.
Would you just old business?
Do you want it titled old business? I said previous items, but I'm welcome to take your
I've seen it literally as old business, but there might be other language suggestions.
That's frequently a Robert's rules thing. I don't know.
I'll
That's fine, whatever,
Yeah.
whatever we call it, as long as we understand.
You understand, it's a gentle reminder.
Anything, any loose ends, anything, yeah, right. Okay.
It's oh. The question,
No, I was just gonna go to item 8, which you were gonna say too.
I was just making a notice that, then our spoken options 1 through 3, none apply.
Right, I think none of those are being selected. So then, section 8 is drafted, is fairly straightforward, including participation and Crimes of the Brown Act. Public commenters will leave 3 minutes on agenda and non-agenda items, and that they must be turned into the city liaison before an agenda item starts. In groups with low participation, I've sort of seen folks come in a little bit late and ask to speak, and I think we should just make it clear what the rule is, if we want to allow the chair discretion for that or not. I don't think it necessarily needs to be stated. And then that option 2, so these options are not mutually exclusive, allow the chair to reduce meeting time. I think again, you don't necessarily have to state that. I think it is allowed already, but it might provide some guidance just to the chair for when we think speaker time should be limited, so that it's not 100% their discretion.
I like both those ideas. So I would happily make a motion to include them. But if, you know, if you're pretty sure, or if Julia knows that they're not needed, then it's already baked in.
I don't, yeah, I mean, if they're not needed, it certainly falls within the chair's role, but I think it's nice clarification. I think it's fine to include it.
We made a motion,
Yes, I make a motion to include option 1 and option 2.
second. In favor?
Sure.
Motion. Yes.
And then I don't know, Article 5, Julie, if you have any kind of overarching comments first, or sounded like you might be recommending that that all get taken out.
I would recommend removal of all of that, as that is it's a city role, and so I don't think it needs to be in the bylaws, for all of you, to be my recommendation.
Comfortable with that, I don't know if we need a motion.
We just take out all of Article 9.
I have a question regarding that. Is there a place at which this is written down, just so that we know like what to ask you for and what not to ask you for kind of thing?
Yes, our boards and commissions does have a overview document of that. It's similar to the chair and the vice chair role sheet that I shared with all of you, so I can share that with you guys.
I'll be interested. Do you want to have a reference in here or just
It's not like a
not an official?
adopted document, it's just like a fact sheet, so it's not something I don't think we can reference.
Oh, slight typos is Article 6, 7.
Well, and actually, yeah, now it would be Article 5.
So, you better. That's what Article 6. Streamline anyway.
Yeah. So this was community relations, just making it clear that the chair, in any cases where there needs to be a spokesperson, the chair is the spokesperson and unless someone else is delegated. And that if people are out attending community events, they can, it's fine to mention that people are on the board, but unless the board has provided somebody authority or that's been delegated by the chair, they're not there as an official person on behalf of the board. And then Article now 6 would be just amendment and adoption of bylaws. We had a conversation about 2/3 vote. It would end up being 7 if the full membership was present in there. It's not different than the 6. I don't foresee that once these bylaws are set, they really will get amended that often. So I don't think it's a significant hard threshold.
Any questions on this? So since we made a number of amendments that were not considered motions, if we need a motion on adopting these as amended.
You won't adopt them today.
So I adopt to moving forward. just
Okay.
to-
Yep.
Cynthia, can I go back to Article 1?
Article
I
1.
had before. This is on, actually, Article 2B. There's a statement, this I know comes from the ordinance, that 4 members should primarily reside or work in communities concerned. And I just, my question is, who checks that box and how do we know it's checked?
So it's a should, not a shall, which means it's something that we are aiming for and we are prioritizing when we're looking for board member seats. But it's not binding, meaning that if we don't have those applications to fill that, that it doesn't preclude other nominations for this.
So when is it determined that as a part of the appointment process?
Part of the appointment process, led by the Office of Boards and Commissions, in coordination with the mayor's office.
And do any of the current board members have that designation?
I am aware of that.
how do we? The definition of like work, where you're
In a remote world.
remote world, but also, I'm just thinking.
What
just
communities are
provide-
you surveying?
What's that?
What communities are you surveying? Type of,
Yeah, exactly. Our reach is pretty extensive, but take one in Hoya.
Yeah.
Just not.
I think I technically live in a community of concern. I don't know if that matters. Or still on that. I have two very small things. Correct. I think you need a period at the end of two at the B index. And then I think your last article you need to delete. I think it's number 6. Right? Yeah, right. It should, I think it still says 7. Version. I think,
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
Maybe we don't need the section 1 part. It's the same as the top. Obviously, sections, groups like ours.
There we go.
So, Cynthia, do you want a motion that just to move these forward as amended?
Yes, for the city attorney offices review and then back to our next meeting.
Okay, I would move that the bylaws as amended move forward to the city attorney's office for their comment and the review and actual adoption.
Give it a second.
I second.
Thanks, Andrew.
In favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Excellent. Before we close this item, we'll open this item to public comment, for the election of the secretary. It sounded like we wanted a secretary, but then we never elected secretary.
That was a separate agenda item.
It is.
It's under discussion item, which is, we're currently,
We're going back to public comment.
yes, we are. Let me stop sharing, so we'll be able to do that.
To thank everyone for your patience.
Yes. It's my public comment script for you.
Thank you very much to the bylaw.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Your service.
Yeah.
I'd ask everyone to stand so you can be recognized.
That'd be.
So yeah, do you want to read this out?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so public comment on an agenda item. If you wish to address the board, please complete and submit a speaker form before the board hears the item. You'll be called at the time the item is heard. If you would like to address a comment virtually, you can indicate this by raising your hand if you're using your computer, tablet, or smartphone, or by dialing *9 on your phone. You'll be taken in the order in which you raise your hand. You may only speak once on a particular item. When the chair indicates that it's your turn to speak, click the unmute prompt that will appear on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, and dial *6 on your phone. And so we have one in the virtual queue. We have not received any speaker slips. What's his name? And it is Anne Fahey.
Ms. Fahey, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. This is Ann Faggy. I'm the former chair of the Community Forest Advisory Board, and I have some comments on your work with the bylaws. And then I have a separate non-agenda public comment that I somehow missed in the beginning. My hand had been raised. So number 1 is compliments on running a hybrid meeting. We've been trying to do that with a couple other boards. So I'd love to talk to you, Julia, what you how that particular room was super. Also, what you could do in libraries and other rooms. The Community Forest Advisory Board would like to be hybrid, and they don't really know how they might do that. I wanted to compliment you on the discussion that you're having in the bylaws. You have people who have served on boards. It was a fairly open, how do we make this better? So I really would compliment that. Also, there's no chat here, and I think there's just because of doing, at least be able to send a message to whoever's the host of the meeting, like Julia. I reached her by an email, and there might be a little bit more straightforward to do that, not to have chat comments, but at least to reach the members, someone who is administering the meeting, but otherwise I think it was really smooth. You have a clear picture of the room. I think it's okay not to have the person in place. So I just wanted to compliment you, and I've learned a lot in listening to this meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Are you able to see the chat now?
Let's see. Then the question is, can I send something? It says chat disabled, so I can't send anything.
Okay.
I mean, these are all things to work out. No big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that on the Zoom end. I sent you a chat and said, feel free to reach out to me
I
in
saw
the
the
hybrid
chat.
meeting, but I know you have my email, so feel free to reach out to me on that.
I will do that. And then I have, whenever you want to take it, on non-agenda public comment.
Please go ahead.
Go ahead now, okay? And if you're gonna have a 2-minute thing, there you might be able to do a timer or just keep your own timer in terms of the process. I don't think the public really cares. Most people are so respectful of the 2 minutes anyway. You can also help people by saying that 2 minutes is about 200 words if they're preparing it. All right, so I'm the previous chair of the Community Forest Advisory Board. I'm a certified urban and community forester, and I've literally been a forester now for, I went to graduate school 50 years ago. So I've got into forestry and stayed. So I'm just delighted to still be working and contributing as a forester. So as you all well know, working with trees in the Climate Action Plan. I'm very mindful of the Resilient San Diego plan that when you surveyed, I don't know, 1,200 or 2,100 people, 93% of them were really interested in having more trees in their community. So I know I know that's spot on. The city has a $10 million grant, as you might know, from the Forest Service. It's part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And we're working with a couple different things where they could greatly be strengthened. They weren't elements in the original plan, partly because the plan was never reviewed or the application wasn't reviewed with a CFAB or anybody else. So there's a real opportunity to make this $10 million be more, achieve more of the Resilient San Diego and Climate Action Plan and Equity Forward by having more community engagement for the community locations, for helping the community find some capacity to respond to whatever meetings and trainings the city has, because there's no dollars for anybody, any organization to participate, and that's a real issue in low-income communities. And then the last one is that there's $2.5 million of tree watering, which is not a very high skill, but it's important. It's really high, you know, being able to count on whoever the contractor is. But that right now, that $2.5 million of watering is not going to contracts in companies in Southeast San Diego, but going to the primary tree care contractor who's headquartered out of San Diego. So Julia, you might have some advice on this. We keep working with it. But I want to mostly introduce myself to say that I'm really interested in working with you all when you get into the tree department, urban greening with the Resiliency Board. Then I'd love to be able to participate and contribute some things. So thank you. I'm delighted it's gotten off the ground, and I really did learn a lot by sitting here watching today. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much for your service and for offering yourself as a resource. We have no one else in public comment? No one else in public comment? All right, so we'll move on to item 7B, election of secretary. We haven't adopted the bylaws, but that is included in municipal code, so I'm assuming we can go ahead with that. The electing a secretary.
Yes, you can.
Any questions, any self-nominations or nominations?
I mean, I'd be interested if one of the other committee, subcommittee persons wanted to be secretary. I hesitate to nominate without.
Can I do it on my computer? Or is it mostly, like, are we allowed to be on our computers too? Okay.
Sure. Are you officially nominating?
I'm officially nominated.
Okay.
Give me a second.
All in favor? All opposed? Right, well, congratulations. Now I'm really responsible for recording all of this.
My mom is a court reporter. She'll be very proud of you.
Should bring you a sheet.
I know, I should
Yeah.
bring her machine.
It's still to have.
No, we mostly said it's the votes. It's not like a transcription.
No, it's not a
It's
transcription.
the action item transcription, okay.
Most of your village memorize.
Word.
No, I remember from the committee, Erica was very clear about that.
Well, as Julia said, that's a perfect example.
Yeah,
Does not have to be a transcript. In fact, it should not be.
yeah.
Sure, everyone will want to read to that extent.
So you can just watch the video.
Right.
Wonderful, congratulations, and we are moving on to item 8, which is an overview, I guess, sort of a sample platter of all these plans.
Yes, so noting that we have 13 minutes left, I'm going to go through very quickly, and I think just try to provide a high level of what the plans are for all of you, and then my recommendation would be if there are certain plan documents that you want more detail on, those could probably be presentations within themselves. So let me get the PowerPoint up and then change the screen so that everyone can see.
My secretary duties start next meeting.
Yes.
Sure,
Um,
I don't remember the second.
yes, no, they will start next meeting.
We did say name tags are an option. Okay.
It's like that.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Okay. Slideshow. Okay, so this is just an overview of some of our climate resilience and conservation plans. To start, my role as a staff liaison for the Resiliency Advisory Board, I'm also the Chief Resilience Officer. I sit within the City Planning Department. Our City Planning Department oversees a wide variety of our city plans and is really in charge of planning for homes and jobs, for our environment, to meet our equity goals and to plan for our parks and our public spaces. Within environment, that includes tribal consultations, our historic preservation work, environmental review or CEQA compliance, as well as our climate resilience and our conservation and biodiversity work, both of which fall under the purview of the Resiliency Advisory Board. We have many plans that cover climate and conservation planning. So this really spans from our general plan, which is that overarching vision document for the city, to our MSCP and our vernal pool HCP, which are kind of key core conservation planning documents. Climate resilient SD is our climate adaptation and resilience plan. Then we have our climate action plan, which is climate mitigation plan. The difference between the two of these, and I think there were a few questions on this at our first board meeting, was kind of what is the scope of the Resiliency Advisory Board versus the Climate Advisory Board. And an easy way to think about this is kind of parsing out what is resilience versus what is mitigation. So mitigation is really looking at how do we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. This can be anything from renewable energy to changing modes of transportation. Resilience is focused on how are we preparing for, responding to, or recovering from climate change events. Resilience is guided by Climate Resilient SD. It's largely the Resiliency Advisory Board. Mitigation is covered by our Climate Action Plan. That is largely covered by the Climate Advisory Board. That said, there's a lot of synergies between the plans and overlap between actions and outcomes. So trees are the example we always give for this one, that they provide that sequestration value that contributes to our mitigation goals. They also reduce heat impacts. They can absorb flood water flows, so they fall within both, and likewise, the kind of purview of both the climate advisory board and resiliency advisory board are going to have a little bit of crossover. So climate resilient entity is our first comprehensive climate adaptation and resilience plan. It looks at extreme heat, wildfire, flooding, and sea level rise, and is really aimed at how do we enhance community capacity to respond to these impacts. I'm going to breeze through these. First step was understanding where does the science tell us that we are going to see these impacts across our city so that we can focus in on those areas. We then went through a vulnerability assessment, just the technical assessment to understand what's at risk and how much and what does that mean. The outcome of that is this is a synthesis chart that shows what of our different assets and resources are most vulnerable to different hazards, color coded by hazard here. Basically, main outcome of this is our vulnerable communities, our frontline communities are the most vulnerable. There are also certain asset types that are going to be more vulnerable. So historic and tribal cultural resources are very sensitive. That makes them very vulnerable. A lot of our habitat and open space is also very sensitive. That makes it very vulnerable. From there, we went through a visioning process with our community and our stakeholders to say, where do we want to go? What does resilience look like for the city of San Diego? And we came up with 5 goals: connected and informed communities, resilient and equitable city, protecting our historic and tribal cultural resources, to support thriving and natural environments and maintain critical city services. I am going to go through all of the slides on these for the sake of time. But all of these are really aimed at, I would say, 2 main buckets. One is, how are we supporting our communities and enhancing community capacity to respond to these events, to make sure that communities are prepared, that they have the services and information that they need. And the other is thinking about those critical city services, things that are protecting public health and safety. How do we ensure that the city is able to maintain those services? They are all held within an implementation framework that is an appendices to the plan that outlines what the strategy is, what does it look like to implement the strategy, what is the time frame for implementation, what climate hazards does it address, what core benefits come along with implementation. We retitled them core benefits, not co-benefits, because we really wanted to underscore that these additional benefits that come with a lot of the adaptation and resilience strategies shouldn't be seen as secondary. So things that are improving recreation access, improving green space, supporting our greenhouse gas mitigation goals, addressing social equity concerns, that those are all really central to the outcome of resilience overall. We also have high level cost estimates. These are looking at both what is the initial or that like capital cost and what is the ongoing operations and maintenance cost to maintain that strategy. We report all of this out annually through our online implementation tracker. It is organized by goal, policy, and strategy, and then shows what is the status of each strategy within the plan. Have we not started the strategy yet? Is it in progress or is it completed? It also includes an implementation highlight section for each goal that includes major milestones, achievements that have been reached, and includes links to those so that you can learn more about them. Next, this is so much to cover in a very short period of time, guys, is biodiverse SD. So this is our overarching conservation program. It's made up of primarily 2 plans. The first is our multiple species conservation program sub-area plan, and the next is our vulnerable habitat conservation program. This program overall is really looking at how do we make sure that we're holistically planning for our habitats, that we are not kind of piecemealing approaches to habitats, but also that we're doing it in a way that we can think about where do we need development and allow for that to move forward while still protecting our threatened and endangered species. In the San Diego region, San Diego is a biodiversity hotspot. We are the most biodiverse county in the country, which is a huge bragging right, I think. And so these 2 programs are really looking at how do we make sure that we continue that going forward. So the MSCP, as it is called, covers 85 different species. It is identifying that habitat through what we call our MHPA, or our multi-habitat planning area. That is the area that is protected for these different species. We do have an interactive map that is online where you can go and see where this area is. Here we go. So that is it's our hardline preserve. Our goal is to conserve 52,000, a little over 52,000 acres by 2047, and I believe we are like 90%
Close.
right there.
Either currently conserved or scheduled to be conserved. Very close.
Which is really exciting. Within this, and our expert is here, our natural resource management plans implement a requirement of our MSCP, and they really go further to develop specific management actions for different areas and different habitats. Sections of our MHPA within both the Climate Action Plan and Climate Resilient SD. There was the call to incorporate climate mitigation adaptation into these plans as they are updated. The Park and Recreation Department works really hard on this. We have more than 28 resource areas. 8 are complete and 3 are currently in progress. They do take a good amount of staff resources to complete. And it's something that the city has been looking at. How do we make sure that we are allocating resources towards this so that we can continue to update them in a timely manner. And then finally, the vernal pool HCP, or Habitat Conservation Program, really just expands on our MSCP and our MHPA to cover additional species and cover additional habitat areas of certain sensitive species. I'm almost there. Our Coastal Resilience Master Plan, this is an implementation action of Climate Resilient SD. It looks at prioritizing pilot projects along our coast for the development of nature-based solutions. It is grant funded through the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the California State Coastal Conservancy. We are looking to release the draft plan next month, so keep your eyes out for that. It includes various different components. The core of that are really these concept designs for the 6 locations along our coast to develop pilot projects for them in phase 2. In phase 1, we are completing a programmatic environmental impact report. In phase 2, we will complete additional environmental analysis as needed. Throughout this process, we're really trying to coordinate closely with our communities and our stakeholders to make sure that we are bringing in community values and community perspective for what they want to see along the coast going into the future, to work with subject matter experts in this area through our stakeholder advisory committee, and then to coordinate closely with the tribes, because we do know that some of these locations are of cultural significance to them. And then finally, strategy 5 of the Climate Action Plan is resilient infrastructure and healthy ecosystems. There's 3 main targets under this related to restoration of salt marshlands and associated tidal wetlands and riparian habitats, expansion of our urban canopy cover, and then also providing a local water supply through pure water. We are currently in progress on all of these. Up on the slides are just some of the more recent accomplishments that have moved us forward for each of these specific measures. So some grant funding for tree canopy. De Natural Amendment was approved by City Council this past spring. It is now with Coastal Commission for their review. And then phase 1 of pure water is nearing completion. I put some links so that those are available to all of you. These are the main home pages for Biodiverse SD, Climate Resilient SD, and the Climate Action Plan. So if you're interested in any of these programs, there's more information there. It is 3 p.m. perfect. Nice work.
How could you start?
Not a question.
Okay, we have an expert here. If you have anything that would be helpful to add.
Yeah, just, I mean, like Julia said, I have a full 2-hour presentation on the MSCP. If you want to really dive into it, we can dive into it. The same with the vernal pool HCP. That's my staff and I are the kind of implementation arm of those conservation plans. So if you want to, as a board, want to dive into any of those plans really deeply, or kind of understand what it is that we do at Parks and Rec, because we're kind of the like I said, the implementation arm, along with some of our partners at the Real Estate Assets Department and Public Utilities Department, also manage some of these lands that are covered by the MSCP. So if that's something the board would like, I'm more than happy to come and give a very detailed presentation on that. All of those plans we can talk about, the vernal pool HCP, the MSCP, and the vernal pool monitoring and management plan. So that's something we can, get into if you guys really want to. I'm happy to do that. In fact, it's my passion of mine to educate and kind of advocate for these. Yeah, it is very interesting. We have a lot of stuff, and I think the main part is that we're doing a lot of things that not a lot of cities are on the same path that we are. I went to the National Park and Recreation Association meeting last year and met with a bunch of other folks across the country that are doing MSCPs, and ours was implemented like 27 years ago, before a lot of these were even talked about. Like the city of Houston only has 3,000 acres of open space lands. Yes, and they're way bigger than us. The city of San Diego has the largest urban preserve in the United States. And that's something that I think we should be expounding on, and people should know about. And we're not great at telling our story. That's region wide, that we had a group of people that met at the Internet Climate Consortium, so we met at the Natural History Museum as a group of regional kind of biodiversity experts. And the consensus was that we weren't great as a region about telling our story. San Diego, people think about San Diego for the weather and SeaWorld and all these other things, but we wanted to really become this biodiversity hotspot in the public's view, not just, on paper somewhere. So happy to tell you all the great opportunities we have for restoration in the future, things we're doing currently right now, and some places where we could utilize your help to kind of forward some of our initiatives through the Parks and Recreation or MSCP, that whole part of things. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I'd love to come to these meetings just to be a resource for you, for the board here, to ask things. And I work with Andrew on a regular basis, so we have a constant level of communication. So he can always let me know if the board is thinking some way. I'm happy to come in and talk to you. Of course, I work with Julia too. So, but think of me as a resource, like Anne had offered herself as a resource. I'm happy to be that, and I'm proud to be that for the city. So yeah, thank you. Yeah.
We just may take shameless advantage of that.
Hey, that's what I'm here for, to be an advocate for open spaces and give you guys the most important information so you can make recommendations to the council or the mayor's office.
So I have one question for Julie, if I could. I know we're out of time. A lot of material and a lot of plans and studies have been done. A lot of them have to do with resiliency and adaptation. Would it be fair to say, though, that none of these plans and documents directly references this advisory?
Correct, because all of the documents were developed and adopted before the advisory board. So the advisory board, your purview is over them for the resolution, but they're not going to directly.
So I think it's a real challenge for this group. I noticed it as I was going through it, and I thought, well, it's great to have all the information. Our challenge is how do we get to be part of all this work that's been done and add value?
So to the same question, I wonder if our role isn't really advising on the implementation piece of it. We can take all this stuff as given, these plans are done, the homework is there. Now we need to know how to move forward with it.
Yeah.
And to that end, my question would be, how would you like to get questions on this? How do we, because there's so much information I enjoyed going through it. I mean, the idea that San Diego has more vernal pools to protect than any other part, like, these are not two things that I would have ordinarily associated, so it's like.
I think a great next step, and to kind of expand on what Mark was saying, all of these plans could be a full presentation, 45 minutes or more in themselves. And so maybe I would say this could be a discussion item for the next meeting of what would you like to see. And it probably fits nicely into that work plan discussion too. Of what would you guys want to see more on, and maybe poke around the plans a little bit. If you already know you have specific areas of interest in something, that's great. But they cover a lot of topic areas between the MSCP, the NRMPs, the natural resource management plans, the Vernal HCP, Climbers Lane SD, and the CAP, like, they're covering a lot of subject matter area, and so. That would be my suggestion is to have that be a discussion item, maybe at a future meeting, to see where you want to dig in a little bit more. And have some presentations on that, whether it's from myself or Mark or another subject matter expert.
Some advice I was given a while ago is if you only had 3 goals, figure out what you want to accomplish. The coastal resilience master plan, is that the one that's in the pipeline right now?
That is currently being developed. We anticipate releasing a draft at the beginning of November. And then we will be holding some community outreach events in November, potentially December as well, around the draft plan.
Which plan is this?
The coastal resilience master plan.
Oh,
That's why we like abbreviations and acronyms, once you know what they are. Item 9, thank you everyone for staying over. Are there any announcements that I would like to make? I have one that I will probably not be at the next meeting since I have travel and unfortunately was scheduled quite a while ago, but you're. Regarding future agenda items, I do anticipate the work plan will be on the next agenda since it is. Sammy made some other good points about that, prioritizing. And always open to suggestions. Something else? Meeting, do you have?
Well, this probably falls under the heading of future agenda items as well, and that is some sense, maybe a brief summary from you, Julia, about the capacity to do this work. We're focusing on implementation. What city resources are already engaged in that? One of the ones that popped out to me is there's a lot of mapping here. There's a lot of GIS, but I also see that it's a joint powers authority between the city and county. And I'm like, how does one access that resource? So that's a question that gets to implementation capacity. So if that's the focus of this group, we're going to take these plans and help advise on how to move forward or prioritize or whatever.
Yeah.
How do we learn what's already going on the implementation side and the capacity to do it?
It's a good question. So I would say implementation spans many different departments for everything. So as Mark mentioned, for the MSCP, that's held within.
You don't have to answer these questions right
Sure.
now. Back to them.
It's held within many different departments. Same for Climbers Lane SD when we were developing the strategies for that. I believe it was 19 different city departments that were coordinating departments on that. So when we're thinking about capacity, it's not a clear-cut answer necessarily. That is something I think a good maybe resource to look into for that is the climate action implementation plan. That was work that was done to really understand what does it look like in terms of resources, both staff and funding that's needed to move each of the strategies forward.
That's needed as opposed to in hand.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we added the climate in the implementation plan. I reached out to all of our staff. It's like, what's it gonna take to implement these recommendations? And that's clearly defined in that implementation plan.
The implementation plan.
Yes.
Which one are you talking about?
So CAP implementation.
Climate action.
Yeah, climate action implementation plan.
As opposed to the next.
Some of them are very much intertwined with MS, like natural resource management planning is a climate action plan goal, but it's also a requirement of MSCP. And so we, as a department, have kind of developed a priority plan for developing natural resource management plans based on what we have currently. And then the implementation plan for the CAP, we talk about how we're going to do that if we want to need to do that in the future. Like, so we can tell you, it takes about 3 years to develop a plan right now with our current staff, one plan. For each, and we have 28 to go, and we have 23 years left to do that. So you can do the math.
Yeah.
We don't have enough resources to get all those done. And then,
Mark, would you just introduce yourself in terms of your name and where
Yeah.
are you in this organization?
so Mark Berninger, I am the senior planner at Parks and Recreation. I'm one of the senior planners at Parks and Recreation Department. I sit in the open space division. My working title is the natural resources manager. And my staff and I are the implementation arm of the MSCP and the Vernal Pool HCP. So I have 2 biologists that currently work for me for interns. And we do all the monitoring management of these endangered and rare species across the city. in conjunction with our restoration partners like Bird Alliance, San Diego River Park Foundation, San Diego Canyonlands, Chaparral Landscapes, so a bunch of, the zoo, a bunch of different folks. We coordinate efforts with them around MSDP covered species within the city and the vernal pool HCP as well. Yeah,
Do you have any cards?
I do. I have a whole lot of them. Yep.
Quickly,
And
we are over
yeah,
time.
I-
We don't have an official meeting date for the next meeting, so I will send out a doodle poll just to confirm that what
Thursday,
date works.
Thursday.
Yes, I will be out of town, and so there will be someone else in the extent, if that is anything that is, before you guys before.
Question, well, is anyone planning on or have plans to be out of town that third week? Did not get-
What is that, the 7th?
It would be the 21st, which is a week before Thanksgiving.
Oh, wait, maybe. For that Thursday, it's the week.
I know you'll be sending around a poll.
I'll be sending around a poll, yeah.
I do know we're over, just thank again, thanks for bringing that up. And, yes, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair.
You're good, I didn't see that.